Welcome to Stoic Vivu, where ancient wisdom meets modern living. Here on our channel, we're dedicated to transforming the timeless teachings of classical Stoic philosophy into practical tools that help you navigate today's chaotic world with unshakable inner strength and genuine peace of mind. You're living in an age of unprecedented mental and emotional challenges. Every day, you're bombarded with notifications, deadlines, traffic jams, difficult people, and countless situations that seem designed to steal your peace and trigger your stress response. You wake up already feeling behind, spend your day reacting to one crisis after another, and collapse into bed with your mind still racing about everything you couldn't control. The modern world seems specifically engineered to keep you in a constant state of emotional turbulence. But what if you discovered that over 2,000 years ago, three brilliant philosophers developed a complete system for achieving emotional mastery that works just as powerfully today as it did in ancient Rome? What if these techniques could help you gain complete control over your emotional responses, find genuine peace in the midst of chaos, and develop the kind of unshakable mental strength that allows you to thrive no matter what life throws your way? Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the ancient world, used these exact principles to maintain perfect emotional balance while leading the Roman Empire through plague, war, and political upheaval. Epictetus, who rose from slavery to become one of history's most influential teachers, developed practical techniques for mental discipline that transformed his students into emotionally resilient individuals. Seneca, advisor to emperors and one of Rome's greatest writers, created daily practices for achieving inner tranquility that remain just as effective today. Today, you're going to learn their secrets, not theories or abstract philosophy, but actual techniques you can implement immediately to transform your emotional experience. You'll discover the fundamental principle that separates what you can control from what you cannot, instantly eliminating the majority of your daily stress. You'll master the art of rational thinking, learning to catch negative thought patterns before they spiral into anxiety or anger. You'll develop present moment awareness that allows you to find peace regardless of external circumstances. Most importantly, you'll learn to build what we call your emotional immune system, a form of inner strength that makes you virtually impervious to the daily frustrations and pressures that overwhelm most people. These aren't temporary fixes or shallow positive thinking techniques. These are profound life skills that create lasting transformation in how you experience every aspect of your daily existence. The ancient Stoics understood something that modern psychology is just beginning to rediscover. True emotional freedom comes not from changing your external circumstances, but from mastering your internal responses. When you develop this mastery, you become the architect of your own emotional experience, capable of maintaining peace, clarity, and strength regardless of what happens around you. Over the next several sections, you'll learn exactly how to develop these capabilities through specific practical techniques that you can begin using immediately. Let's start your journey toward complete emotional mastery. 1. Discover what you actually control and find instant relief. You're stuck in gridlock traffic on your way to an important meeting, watching the minutes tick by as your stress level skyrockets. Your mind races with anxious thoughts about being late, what your colleagues will think, and how this delay might affect your entire day. Your heart pounds, your jaw clenches, and you feel that familiar surge of helpless frustration washing over you. Sound familiar? You're experiencing what millions of people face daily, but you're about to learn the single most powerful technique in all of Stoic philosophy for transforming moments like these from sources of suffering into opportunities for inner strength. Epictetus, the great Stoic teacher who understood human suffering intimately, opened his most famous work with these revolutionary words: "Some things are within our control, while others are not. Things within our control are opinion, pursuit, desire, aversion, and, in a word, whatever are our own actions. Things not within our control are body, property, reputation, command, and, in one word, whatever are not our own actions." This principle, known as the dichotomy of control, represents the foundation of all emotional freedom and the key to ending unnecessary suffering in your daily life. The profound genius of this teaching lies in its simplicity and immediate applicability. Right now, in this very moment, you can divide everything in your life into exactly two categories: things you control completely and things you do not control at all. There is no middle ground, no gray area, no partial control. This clear distinction becomes your pathway to instant relief from the majority of your daily stress and anxiety. Let's return to that traffic scenario and apply this principle with surgical precision. You cannot control the traffic flow, the accident ahead, the number of cars on the road, or the time you'll arrive at your destination. These factors exist completely outside your sphere of influence, no matter how much mental energy you invest in worrying about them. However, you maintain complete control over your thoughts about the situation, your emotional response to the delay, your breathing pattern, and your decision about how to use this unexpected time. Marcus Aurelius, writing from the battlefield during military campaigns, understood this distinction perfectly. In his personal journal, which we now call Meditations, he reminds himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Notice that he doesn't say you have some power or partial power, but complete power over your mind and no power over outside events. This absolute distinction eliminates the exhausting middle ground where most people spend their energy trying to control the uncontrollable. When you truly grasp this principle, something remarkable happens. Imagine you're walking into your office to discover an urgent email from your supervisor requesting a report by end of day. Your old pattern might involve immediate panic, resentment about the short notice, and stress about your already packed schedule. But now you pause and apply the dichotomy of control. You cannot control your supervisor's request, the deadline, or the fact that this task has landed on your plate. These elements belong entirely in the not my control category. What remains completely within your control? Your response to this request, your attitude toward the challenge, your decision about how to prioritize your time, and your choice to view this as an opportunity to demonstrate competence rather than a burden to endure. This shift in focus from the uncontrollable to the controllable doesn't just reduce your stress. It redirects your energy toward actions that can actually improve your situation. The ancient Stoics discovered that most human suffering comes from a fundamental category error. We exhaust ourselves trying to control things that lie outside our influence while neglecting the areas where we have complete authority. Consider how much mental energy you've wasted worrying about other people's opinions of you, whether conditions affecting your plans or past decisions you cannot change. All of this energy could have been channeled toward the thoughts, actions, and responses that remain entirely within your power. Seneca, writing to his friend Lucilius, explains this principle through a practical lens. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. He understood that accepting what we cannot control creates space for us to act powerfully within our actual sphere of influence. When you stop fighting against traffic, you can use that time for reflection, planning, or simply practicing presence. When you accept that your supervisor has made a request, you can focus entirely on crafting an excellent response. This practice requires constant vigilance and honest self-assessment. Throughout your day, you'll catch your mind wandering into worry about uncontrollable factors. The moment you notice this happening, gently redirect your attention to what remains within your power. Ask yourself, what can I actually influence in this situation? Then channel all your mental and emotional energy toward those controllable elements. The relief you'll experience is immediate and profound. Instead of feeling like a victim of circumstances, you become an active agent, focusing only on areas where your efforts can create real results. Your stress diminishes because you're no longer fighting battles you cannot win. Your effectiveness increases because your energy flows toward actions that matter. Epictetus taught his students that this principle applies equally to major life events and minor daily annoyances. Whether you're dealing with a career setback, relationship conflict, or simply a slow internet connection, the same fundamental truth applies. Suffering comes from wanting to control what you cannot control, while peace comes from accepting what is and focusing completely on your response. As you begin implementing this ancient wisdom, you'll discover that most of your daily stress simply dissolves. The dichotomy of control doesn't eliminate challenges from your life, but it eliminates the unnecessary suffering that comes from fighting against reality. You develop what the Stoics called equanimity, an unshakable inner balance that remains stable regardless of external circumstances. Therefore, your path to emotional mastery begins with this fundamental practice. In every situation, first identify what you can and cannot control, then invest your complete attention in the areas of your actual influence. This simple yet profound shift will transform how you experience every aspect of your daily life. 2. Transform negative thoughts into powerful allies. You're lying awake at 2 a.m., your mind churning through an endless loop of worst-case scenarios about tomorrow's presentation. Each thought seems to multiply into 3 more anxious possibilities, and before you know it, you've mentally rehearsed a complete professional disaster in vivid detail. Your heart races, your palms grow sweaty, and sleep becomes impossible as these runaway thoughts hold your peace of mind hostage. This scenario reveals one of the most crucial battlegrounds in your daily life: the war between destructive thinking patterns and your ability to maintain emotional balance. Marcus Aurelius, writing in his personal journal while leading the Roman Empire through unprecedented challenges, understood this mental battlefield intimately. He reminds himself in Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But he goes deeper than this foundational principle, explaining exactly how to exercise that power over your thinking patterns. The emperor who commanded legions first learned to command his own thoughts, and his techniques remain just as effective today. The ancient Stoics discovered something that modern neuroscience now confirms. Your thoughts are not facts, and you are not powerless against negative thinking patterns. Every thought that enters your mind can be examined, questioned, and either accepted or rejected based on its truth and usefulness. This process, which the Stoics called rational analysis, transforms you from a passive victim of runaway thinking into an active curator of your mental experience. Consider this scenario. You're walking into work when you notice your supervisor seems unusually quiet during your morning greeting. Immediately, your mind begins generating explanations. She must be angry with my performance. I'm probably going to get fired. This job was too good to be true anyway. Within seconds, these thoughts trigger genuine anxiety, affecting your confidence and performance throughout the day. But Marcus Aurelius would stop this cascade immediately by applying rigorous rational examination. The first step involves catching the negative thought pattern as it begins. The Stoics called this developing prosoke, which means continuous attention to your mental processes. Just as you might notice physical discomfort in your body, you learn to notice when your thoughts begin moving in destructive directions. This awareness alone breaks the automatic cycle and creates space for a rational response instead of emotional reaction. Once you've caught the negative thought, you apply what Epictetus taught as the discipline of assent. You examine each thought like a prosecutor cross-examining a witness, asking penetrating questions about its validity. In our workplace example, you would ask, do I actually know why my supervisor was quiet? Are there other possible explanations beyond my job performance? Am I treating my interpretation as fact when it's merely one possibility among many? This questioning process reveals that most negative thoughts fail basic logical scrutiny. Your supervisor could have been quiet because she was tired, focused on other concerns, dealing with personal matters, or simply having a normal human moment that had nothing to do with you. By subjecting your initial interpretation to rational analysis, you discover that you were preparing to suffer over a completely imaginary problem. But the Stoics understood that simply stopping negative thoughts isn't enough. Marcus Aurelius teaches us to replace destructive thinking with constructive alternatives that serve our well-being and effectiveness. Instead of assuming your supervisor's quietness means professional disaster, you can choose thoughts that empower rather than paralyze. I don't know why she was quiet, and that's perfectly fine. I'll focus on doing excellent work today and address any actual issues if they arise. Seneca, writing to his friend Lucilius, explains this transformation process. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. When you end the pattern of accepting negative thoughts without examination, you begin the practice of conscious thought selection. This doesn't mean forcing artificial positivity, but rather choosing thoughts that are both realistic and helpful. Let's apply this to your late-night presentation anxiety. Instead of allowing your mind to rehearse disaster scenarios, you catch the negative thought pattern and examine it rationally. You ask yourself, am I prepared for this presentation? Have I done similar presentations successfully before? What evidence do I have that tomorrow will be a disaster? Usually, you'll discover that your preparation is solid, you have relevant experience, and your fears are disproportionate to actual risk. Then you replace the destructive mental rehearsal with constructive preparation. Rather than imagining everything going wrong, you mentally walk through your key points, visualize confident delivery, and plan how to handle questions effectively. This transforms the same mental energy that was creating anxiety into a tool for genuine preparation and confidence building. The key insight Marcus Aurelius discovered is that thoughts are like visitors to your mind. You can examine each visitor, decide whether they're helpful or harmful, and choose which ones to welcome and which ones to dismiss. Some thoughts deserve your attention and energy because they help you solve problems or improve situations. Others deserve immediate dismissal because they create suffering without providing any practical benefit. This practice requires patience and consistent effort, much like developing physical strength through regular exercise. Each time you catch a negative thought pattern and replace it with rational analysis, you're strengthening your capacity for mental discipline. Over time, this becomes automatic, and you'll find that destructive thinking patterns lose their power to derail your emotional equilibrium. The ancient Stoics understood that mastering your thoughts is the foundation of all other life improvements. When you can transform negative thinking patterns into rational analysis and constructive focus, you gain an unshakable advantage in every area of your life. Consequently, your thoughts become powerful allies rather than hidden enemies, supporting your goals and well-being instead of undermining your peace and effectiveness. 3. Master the art of present moment peace. You're sitting at your desk, but your mind is simultaneously replaying yesterday's awkward conversation with a colleague, worrying about next week's deadline, and catastrophizing about your upcoming performance review. Meanwhile, your coffee grows cold, emails pile up unread, and the actual work in front of you remains untouched because your attention is scattered across past regrets and future anxieties. This mental time travel, jumping constantly between what was and what might be, robs you of the only moment where you actually have power to create, decide, and experience genuine peace. Marcus Aurelius, despite carrying the enormous responsibilities of ruling an empire, understood that all real power exists exclusively in the present moment. In his Meditations, he writes, "Confine yourself to the present." This wasn't merely philosophical advice, but a practical necessity for someone who needed to make life and death decisions while managing complex political, military, and social challenges. The emperor discovered that present moment awareness wasn't just a path to inner peace, but the foundation of all effective action and clear thinking. The ancient Stoics developed what they called prosoke, which means continuous attention or mindful awareness. Unlike modern mindfulness practices that often focus on relaxation, Stoic present moment awareness serves as a practical tool for enhanced effectiveness and emotional stability. When you anchor your attention in the present, you gain access to your full mental resources instead of fragmenting your consciousness across multiple time periods that exist only in your imagination. Let's examine how this works in a concrete scenario. You're preparing dinner after a long day, but instead of engaging with the simple pleasure of cooking, your mind wanders to tomorrow's challenging meeting. As you chop vegetables, you're mentally rehearsing difficult conversations, imagining various scenarios, and building anxiety about outcomes you cannot predict or control. This mental absence transforms a potentially peaceful activity into a source of stress, and you miss the opportunity to find restoration in the present task. Seneca teaches us that this pattern represents a fundamental misunderstanding about where life actually happens. In his letters to Lucilius, he explains, "True happiness is to enjoy the present, without anxious dependence upon the future." Notice that he doesn't suggest ignoring future planning or avoiding responsibility, but rather enjoying what is present while you attend to it fully. When you're cooking dinner, you can experience the colors, textures, and aromas while your mind remains settled in the actual activity rather than scattered across imaginary futures. The practice begins with what Epictetus called the discipline of attention. You train yourself to notice when your mind has left the present moment and gently guide it back to immediate reality. This isn't about suppressing thoughts about the past or the future, but rather recognizing when these thoughts serve no practical purpose and choosing to return your attention to where your actual power resides. Each time you catch your mind wandering and bring it back, you're strengthening your capacity for sustained presence. Consider this application during your morning commute. Instead of allowing your mind to race ahead to your day's challenges or backward to yesterday's mistakes, you can practice present moment awareness by fully engaging with your immediate experience. You notice the feeling of your hands on the steering wheel, observe the changing scenery around you, or pay attention to your breathing rhythm. This isn't empty meditation but active engagement with reality as it unfolds. Marcus Aurelius understood that present moment awareness becomes particularly crucial during stressful situations. When you're facing a difficult conversation, dealing with unexpected problems, or managing complex responsibilities, your natural tendency might be to mentally escape into worry about outcomes or regret about past decisions. But the Stoic approach keeps your attention anchored in the current moment, where you can actually respond effectively to what's happening right now. The emperor developed a specific technique for maintaining present focus during challenging circumstances. He would ask himself, "What does this moment require of me?" This question immediately brings attention back to the present reality and identifies the specific action or response that the situation demands. Instead of getting lost in anxiety about how things might unfold, you focus entirely on what you can do right now with the information and resources currently available. This practice transforms your relationship with time itself. Most people experience time as either too slow when they're bored or too fast when they're busy, because they're not actually present with their experience. When you develop genuine present moment awareness, time feels more spacious and manageable because you're not fragmenting your consciousness across multiple temporal locations. You experience what the Stoics called kairos, the qualitative dimension of time where moments feel full and meaningful rather than rushed and anxious. Seneca provides practical guidance for developing this capacity. Every moment thinks steadily as a Roman and a man. He's encouraging continuous presence and dignity in each successive moment rather than allowing your mind to create suffering through temporal displacement. You can adapt this practice by bringing your full attention to whatever task or situation currently demands your engagement, whether that's listening to a friend, completing work projects, or simply walking from one location to another. The profound benefit of present moment awareness extends beyond stress reduction to enhanced capability and satisfaction. When you're fully present with your work, you perform better because your complete mental resources focus on the task at hand. When you're present with other people, your relationships deepen because they feel genuinely seen and heard. When you're present with daily activities, you discover unexpected sources of peace and even joy in ordinary moments. This practice requires patience and consistent effort because modern life constantly pulls your attention away from immediate reality. Every notification, worry, and distraction represents an invitation to abandon the present moment. But each time you choose to return your attention to what's actually happening right now, you're building the mental strength that the ancient Stoics recognized as essential for both inner peace and outer effectiveness. Therefore, mastering present moment awareness becomes your pathway to accessing the calm, clarity, and capability that exist only in the eternal now where life actually unfolds. 4. Build your emotional immune system. You're in the middle of an important phone call when your neighbor starts using power tools right outside your window. The noise cuts through your conversation, making it impossible to hear clearly, and you feel that familiar surge of irritation rising in your chest. Your jaw tightens, your breathing becomes shallow, and suddenly this external disruption has hijacked your entire emotional state. Within moments, you've gone from calm and focused to frustrated and scattered, all because of something completely outside your control. This scenario reveals why you need what the ancient Stoics understood as essential for mental resilience: an emotional immune system that protects your inner state from external disturbances. Marcus Aurelius, who faced daily pressures that would overwhelm most people, developed sophisticated techniques for maintaining emotional stability regardless of circumstances. In his personal writings, he reflects, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." This isn't merely inspirational advice, but a practical recognition that your emotional responses are determined by how you process external events, not by the events themselves. Just as your physical immune system protects your body from harmful invaders, your emotional immune system protects your mental state from unnecessary disturbances. The foundation of this emotional immunity lies in understanding what Epictetus taught about the true source of emotional reactions. In his discourses, he explains, "People are not disturbed by things, but by their judgments about things. The power tools outside your window are simply vibrations in the air. The disruption to your emotional state comes not from the noise itself, but from your interpretation of that noise as an attack on your peace, an inconsiderate act, or an unfair interruption of your important call." This distinction becomes your first line of defense. When you encounter potentially irritating situations, you pause before allowing automatic emotional reactions to take control. You recognize that your initial impulse to feel frustrated represents a choice point where you can either strengthen or weaken your emotional immune system. Each time you choose a rational response over an emotional reaction, you're building resilience that will serve you in increasingly challenging situations. Let's apply this framework to a common workplace scenario. You're presenting your ideas in a team meeting when a colleague interrupts with what seems like a dismissive comment. Your natural impulse might be to feel personally attacked, defensive, or angry. But instead of allowing these emotions to flood your system, you pause and examine the situation through a Stoic lens. You ask yourself, what actually happened here versus what story am I telling myself about what happened? Seneca provides practical guidance for this examination process in his letters to Lucilius. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. When you end the pattern of automatic emotional reactivity, you begin the practice of conscious response selection. Your colleague made a comment. That's the factual reality. Everything else, whether it was intended as dismissive, whether it reflects poorly on your ideas, or whether it means you're not respected, represents interpretations that you're adding to the basic fact. The Stoic approach involves testing these interpretations against reality. Did your colleague explicitly state that your ideas were worthless? Is it possible they were seeking clarification rather than expressing dismissal? Could their comment have been poorly timed rather than intentionally rude? This rational examination usually reveals that your emotional reaction was based more on assumptions than on verified facts. Marcus Aurelius developed a specific technique for building emotional immunity during interpersonal challenges. He would remind himself that other people's actions reflect their own character and circumstances, not necessarily anything about him or his worth. When someone behaves rudely, impatiently, or inconsiderately, their behavior reveals their current mental state, their level of stress, their communication skills, or their personal struggles. This perspective transforms potential emotional wounds into information about others rather than attacks on yourself. This practice requires distinguishing between appropriate emotional responses and unnecessary emotional reactivity. If someone threatens your safety, concern, and protective action makes complete sense. If someone provides legitimate criticism of your work, taking their feedback seriously demonstrates wisdom. But if someone's bad mood, poor timing, or inconsiderate behavior triggers hours of mental disturbance, you're allowing external circumstances to control your internal experience in ways that serve no practical purpose. The ancient Stoics understood that building emotional immunity requires progressive training, much like developing physical fitness. You start with smaller irritations and practice maintaining emotional equilibrium during minor inconveniences. When you can remain calm during traffic delays, slow internet connections, or brief interruptions, you develop the strength to handle larger challenges like workplace conflicts, relationship difficulties, or major disappointments. Epictetus taught his students to view each emotional challenge as an opportunity to strengthen their inner resilience. Instead of seeing difficult people or frustrating situations as problems to avoid, you can reframe them as training exercises for your emotional immune system. The rude customer service representative becomes your teacher in patience. The inconsiderate neighbor becomes your instructor in detachment from external circumstances. This transformation in perspective creates what the Stoics called apatheia, which doesn't mean emotional numbness but rather emotional freedom. You remain capable of appropriate feelings while becoming immune to unnecessary emotional disturbances. You can feel genuine joy without being dependent on external circumstances for happiness. You can experience healthy concern without drowning in anxiety about uncontrollable outcomes. Ultimately, your emotional immune system becomes one of your most valuable life skills, protecting your inner peace while allowing you to respond to situations with clarity and wisdom rather than reactivity and disturbance. 5. Create unshakable inner calm every day. You wake up each morning feeling like you're already behind schedule before your feet hit the floor. Your mind immediately floods with the day's demands, upcoming deadlines, and lingering concerns from yesterday that somehow multiplied overnight. Before you've even brushed your teeth, that familiar knot of tension has settled into your chest, and you're operating from a baseline of low-grade anxiety that will color every interaction and decision throughout your day. This pattern reveals something crucial. True inner calm isn't something that occasionally happens to you during vacation or meditation retreats, but rather a skill you can deliberately cultivate through specific daily practices that the ancient Stoics perfected over centuries of philosophical development. Marcus Aurelius, despite managing the enormous complexities of ruling the Roman Empire during plague, war, and political upheaval, maintained what observers described as remarkable equanimity and inner peace. His secret wasn't eliminating challenges from his life, but rather developing consistent daily practices that created what he called an unshakable foundation of inner tranquility. In his personal journal, he writes, "The universe is change, our life is what our thoughts make it." This profound insight points to the fact that external circumstances will always fluctuate, but your inner calm can remain constant through deliberate mental discipline and philosophical practice. The foundation of daily inner calm begins with what Seneca called the morning preparation of the mind. Before engaging with external demands, you establish your philosophical orientation for the day ahead. This isn't about positive thinking or wishful optimism, but rather about consciously aligning your perspective with Stoic principles that create emotional stability. You remind yourself of what lies within your control and what does not, setting clear boundaries around where you'll invest your mental and emotional energy. Consider how this morning practice transforms your typical day. Instead of immediately checking your phone and allowing external information to flood your consciousness, you spend 5 minutes establishing your philosophical foundation. You remind yourself that your peace depends not on having a perfect day, but on responding to whatever occurs with virtue and wisdom. You acknowledge that challenges will arise, but you prepare mentally to meet them as opportunities for practicing courage, patience, and rational judgment rather than as threats to your well-being. Epictetus taught that this morning philosophical preparation creates what he called proeresis, which means your capacity for conscious choice in how you respond to circumstances. When you begin each day by strengthening your awareness of this capacity, you approach every subsequent situation from a position of inner strength rather than reactive vulnerability. You recognize that regardless of what happens during the day, you retain complete authority over your thoughts, judgments, and responses. The practice continues throughout the day with what Marcus Aurelius called continuous self-examination. This involves periodically checking your mental and emotional state, noticing when you've been drawn into unnecessary worry, frustration, or agitation, and gently redirecting your attention toward present moment awareness and rational perspective. Think of this as mental hygiene, similar to how you naturally adjust your posture when you notice yourself slouching. Let's examine how this works during a challenging afternoon scenario. You discover that a project you've been working on for weeks needs significant revisions due to changing requirements. Your initial reaction might be frustration about wasted effort, anxiety about new deadlines, or resentment about poor communication. But your continuous self-examination practice allows you to catch these reactions before they establish themselves as your emotional reality for the afternoon. You pause and apply the Stoic framework you've been developing. You recognize that the changed requirements represent circumstances outside your control, while your response to this situation remains completely within your power. You choose to view this revision request as an opportunity to improve the project and demonstrate adaptability, rather than as an attack on your previous efforts. This philosophical reframing doesn't eliminate the practical challenges, but it preserves your inner calm while you address the necessary changes. Seneca provides guidance for maintaining this equilibrium throughout the day in his letters to Lucilius. Every moment think steadily as a Roman and a man. He's encouraging consistent dignity and philosophical perspective in each successive situation rather than allowing external circumstances to determine your internal state. You can practice this by treating each challenge, interaction, or unexpected development as a chance to demonstrate the Stoic virtues of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. The day concludes with what Marcus Aurelius practiced as evening reflection, a systematic review of how you applied philosophical principles during the day's events. This isn't self-criticism about imperfections, but rather an honest assessment of your progress in developing emotional resilience and rational judgment. You examine moments when you maintained inner calm effectively and identify situations where you could have responded more skillfully, treating both successes and learning opportunities as valuable data for continued growth. This evening reflection creates a feedback loop that strengthens your capacity for inner calm over time. Each day's practice builds upon previous days, gradually developing what the Stoics called an unshakable character that remains stable regardless of external fluctuations. You begin to notice that situations that previously would have disturbed your peace for hours or days now have minimal impact on your emotional equilibrium. The profound result of these daily practices is that inner calm transforms from an occasional experience into your natural baseline state. Challenges still arise, but they no longer have the power to steal your peace or cloud your judgment. In essence, daily inner calm becomes not just a pleasant experience, but the foundation from which you approach all of life with greater wisdom, effectiveness, and genuine satisfaction. 6. Turn any stressful situation into personal growth. You're walking into your supervisor's office for what you know will be a difficult conversation about missed deadlines and project delays. Your heart pounds, your palms grow sweaty, and that familiar voice in your head begins catastrophizing about potential consequences. Every step toward that door feels like walking toward judgment and failure, and you find yourself wishing you could disappear entirely rather than face this uncomfortable reality. But what if you discovered that this exact moment, this precise experience of stress and challenge, contains the raw material for developing extraordinary personal strength and wisdom? Marcus Aurelius faced countless situations far more daunting than difficult workplace conversations. Yet he developed a revolutionary perspective that transformed every obstacle into what he called a spiritual exercise. In his Meditations, he writes, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This isn't merely inspirational rhetoric, but a practical methodology for converting stress, challenge, and adversity into the very means by which you develop unshakable character and capabilities that no external circumstance can diminish. The ancient Stoics understood something profound about human development that modern psychology is only beginning to rediscover. You don't grow stronger by avoiding difficulties, but by meeting them with the right mindset and approach. Think of stress as nature's way of presenting you with customized training exercises designed specifically to develop whatever inner qualities you most need to cultivate. The workplace conversation that terrifies you becomes your opportunity to practice courage. The project failure that embarrasses you becomes your chance to develop resilience and learn from mistakes. This transformation begins with what Epictetus taught as reframing your relationship to challenging circumstances. Instead of viewing stressful situations as problems that shouldn't be happening to you, you learn to see them as precisely the experiences you need for developing wisdom, strength, and emotional maturity. The Stoic approach doesn't pretend that difficulties are pleasant, but it recognizes that they serve an essential developmental purpose that comfortable circumstances cannot provide. Let's apply this framework to your supervisor meeting scenario. Rather than approaching this conversation as a victim hoping to minimize damage, you can reframe it as an opportunity to practice several crucial life skills simultaneously. You can develop honesty by taking responsibility for actual mistakes without making excuses. You can cultivate humility by listening to feedback without becoming defensive. You can demonstrate professionalism by focusing on solutions rather than dwelling on problems. Each of these responses represents personal growth that will serve you throughout your career and life. Seneca provides practical guidance for this transformation process in his letters to Lucilius. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. When you end the pattern of viewing stress as pure suffering, you begin to discover the growth opportunities embedded within challenging experiences. The key lies in asking different questions when stress arises. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" or "How can I avoid this discomfort?" you begin asking, "What can I learn from this situation?" and "How can I use this experience to become stronger and wiser?" This shift in questioning immediately changes your relationship to stress from passive victimhood to active development. The traffic jam becomes your chance to practice patience and present moment awareness. The difficult customer becomes your teacher in maintaining composure under pressure. The unexpected expense becomes your opportunity to practice adaptability and creative problem solving. Each stressful situation transforms from something that happens to you into something that strengthens specific aspects of your character. Marcus Aurelius developed this perspective through direct experience with enormous challenges. During the Antonine Plague that devastated the Roman Empire, he could have focused entirely on the tragedy and overwhelming nature of the crisis. Instead, he used this extreme adversity as an opportunity to deepen his philosophical understanding, strengthen his leadership capabilities, and develop even greater compassion for human suffering. He understood that the same external circumstances that could break one person's spirit could forge another person's character into something unshakable. The practical application of this principle requires developing what the Stoics called the view from above, which means stepping back from immediate emotional reactions to see the larger developmental purpose that stressful situations can serve. When you're in the middle of a relationship conflict, for example, you can recognize that this challenge is perfectly designed to help you practice patience, improve your communication skills, and learn to maintain love and respect even during disagreement. Consider how this works when you face financial pressure from unexpected expenses. Your initial response might involve panic about money, frustration about timing, or worry about your financial security. But applying the Stoic growth framework, you recognize that this situation offers multiple development opportunities. You can practice creativity in finding solutions, discipline in adjusting your spending, and acceptance of circumstances beyond your control. You can develop gratitude for resources you do have while learning to find security in your own adaptability rather than external circumstances. This perspective doesn't minimize the real difficulty of stressful situations or suggest that you should feel grateful for every hardship. Rather, it provides a framework for extracting maximum value from challenges that you cannot avoid. You acknowledge that stress is uncomfortable while simultaneously recognizing that this discomfort often signals areas where you have the greatest potential for growth and development. The transformation becomes even more powerful when you begin anticipating growth opportunities within challenging circumstances. You start approaching potentially stressful situations with curiosity about what they might teach you rather than dread about what they might cost you. This shift from fear-based avoidance to growth-oriented engagement fundamentally changes how you experience and navigate life's inevitable difficulties. Epictetus taught that this reframing process creates what he called preferred indifference, meaning that while you naturally prefer comfortable circumstances, you recognize that uncomfortable ones often provide superior opportunities for character development. The difficult conversation with your supervisor becomes preferable to easy interactions because it offers more substantial growth potential. The challenging project becomes more valuable than routine tasks because it demands more of your capabilities. Ultimately, this Stoic approach creates an unshakable foundation for personal development because you no longer depend on comfortable circumstances for growth, recognizing that every experience contains the seeds of greater wisdom and strength. 7. Develop your personal fortress of mental strength. You're facing one of those weeks where everything seems to go wrong simultaneously. Your car breaks down on Monday, a major project gets rejected on Tuesday, you receive disappointing medical news on Wednesday, and by Thursday you feel like you're barely holding yourself together with mental duct tape and caffeine. Each new challenge feels like it might be the one that finally breaks you, and you wonder how much more pressure you can handle before something inside you snaps completely. This overwhelming feeling reveals why the ancient Stoics understood that mental strength isn't something you either have or don't have. but rather something you deliberately construct through specific practices that create what Marcus Aurelius called an inner citadel, an unassailable fortress of the mind that remains secure regardless of external storms. Marcus Aurelius, writing from military campaigns where he faced the constant possibility of defeat, death, and the collapse of everything he'd worked to build, developed perhaps the most sophisticated understanding of mental fortification in human history. In his meditations, he reminds himself, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it." This wasn't wishful thinking from someone living a comfortable life, but hard-won wisdom from a man who maintained extraordinary inner strength while navigating unprecedented external pressures. He understood that mental strength isn't about avoiding difficulties, but about building internal structures that remain stable when difficulties inevitably arise. The foundation of your personal mental fortress begins with what Epictetus called the discipline of desire, which means training yourself to want only what is entirely within your power to achieve. This might sound limiting at first, but it actually represents the ultimate source of unshakable strength because it makes your peace and satisfaction independent of external circumstances. When your deepest desires focus on things like acting with virtue, responding wisely to challenges, and maintaining your integrity regardless of outcomes, no external force can prevent you from achieving what matters most to you. Consider how this works when you're dealing with your car breaking down and a project rejection scenario. Your natural desire might be to have reliable transportation and professional success, both of which depend partially on factors outside your control. But the Stoic approach involves shifting your primary desire toward responding to these challenges with patience, creativity, and wisdom. You can always achieve these internal goals regardless of whether your car gets fixed quickly or your project gets approved, which means your fundamental satisfaction remains within your control. Seneca provides the next layer of mental fortification through what he called voluntary discomfort, which means periodically practicing simplicity and hardship when you don't have to, so that you're prepared when circumstances force these experiences upon you. This isn't masochism but practical preparation, similar to how athletes train under more difficult conditions than they'll face in competition. When you occasionally skip meals, take cold showers, or sleep on the floor, you're building confidence in your ability to maintain equanimity when comfort isn't available. This preparation creates psychological resilience that transforms your relationship to potential hardships. Instead of living in constant anxiety about losing your job, your health, or your comfortable lifestyle, you develop quiet confidence that you could handle these challenges if they arose. You're not hoping for difficulties, but you're no longer afraid of them because you've tested your capacity to find peace and purpose, even when external circumstances become challenging. The next element of your mental fortress involves what Marcus Aurelius practiced as negative visualization, which means regularly contemplating the temporary nature of everything you value. This isn't morbid pessimism but realistic preparation that prevents attachment from becoming a source of vulnerability. When you remember that your health, relationships, possessions, and even your life itself are temporary gifts rather than permanent entitlements, you develop deeper appreciation for them while they're present and greater acceptance when they change or disappear. This practice builds what the Stoics called preferred indifference, meaning that while you naturally prefer good health, loving relationships, and financial security, you recognize that your fundamental well-being doesn't depend on these external goods. You can experience genuine happiness and fulfillment even when circumstances become difficult because your mental fortress provides internal sources of meaning and satisfaction that no external force can eliminate. Epictetus taught that the strongest fortification comes from understanding the temporary nature of all external circumstances, both positive and negative. When you're experiencing success, popularity, or comfortable circumstances, remembering their impermanence prevents complacency and overconfidence. When you're facing failure, criticism, or difficult circumstances, remembering their temporary nature prevents despair and surrender. This perspective creates emotional stability that remains constant regardless of external fluctuations. The daily maintenance of your mental fortress requires what Seneca called continuous self-examination, which means regularly assessing your thoughts, reactions, and responses to ensure they align with philosophical principles rather than being driven by temporary emotions or external pressures. Each evening, you review the day's events and evaluate how effectively you maintained your inner strength during challenging moments. This isn't self-criticism, but an honest assessment that identifies areas for continued development. This ongoing practice gradually builds what the Stoics called an unshakable character, meaning that your core identity and fundamental peace become independent of external validation, circumstances, or outcomes. You develop what Marcus Aurelius described as the view from the citadel, a perspective that sees challenges as temporary weather patterns that cannot touch the essential fortress of your inner life. Ultimately, your personal fortress of mental strength becomes not just a defensive structure that protects you from life's difficulties, but a source of confidence and capability that enables you to engage with challenges from a position of inner security and philosophical wisdom. Your daily path to emotional freedom, integration, and next steps. You've now discovered the complete system that Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus used to maintain unshakable inner peace while facing the greatest challenges life could present. These aren't theoretical concepts or abstract philosophical ideas, but practical techniques that you can begin implementing immediately to transform your relationship with stress, anxiety, and daily pressures. The question now becomes, how will you integrate these ancient secrets into your modern life to create lasting emotional freedom? Remember that these 7 foundational practices work together as a comprehensive system. When you discover what you actually control, you eliminate the majority of unnecessary suffering in your daily experience. When you transform negative thoughts into rational analysis, you stop allowing your mind to create imaginary problems that steal your peace. When you master present moment awareness, you access the calm and clarity that exist only in the here and now. When you build your emotional immune system, external circumstances lose their power to hijack your inner state. The path forward requires consistent daily practice rather than sporadic effort. Start tomorrow morning by spending just 5 minutes identifying what lies within your control for the day ahead. Throughout your day, catch yourself when negative thinking patterns begin and apply the rational analysis techniques you've learned. When stress arises, use it as an opportunity to practice the emotional regulation skills that will serve you for years to come. Most importantly, remember that developing these capabilities is a gradual process that requires patience with yourself. The ancient Stoics spent decades refining these practices, and you shouldn't expect to master them overnight. Each time you successfully apply one of these techniques, you're building mental strength that compounds over time. Each moment you choose rational response over emotional reaction, you're creating the unshakable foundation that will support you through any challenge life presents. The beautiful truth about Stoic philosophy is that once you develop these skills, they become permanent parts of your character that no external circumstance can take away from you. Your job might change, Your relationships might evolve, your health might fluctuate, but your capacity for inner peace, rational judgment, and emotional resilience becomes an unshakable foundation that supports everything else in your life. As you begin implementing these ancient practices, you're joining a tradition that stretches back over 2,000 years, connecting you with countless individuals who have found genuine freedom through Stoic wisdom. You're not just learning techniques for managing stress, but developing the kind of character and inner strength that transforms how you experience every aspect of your existence. If this video has provided you with valuable insights for emotional mastery, please like it and share it with others who could benefit from these time-tested techniques. Subscribe to the Stoic Vivu channel for more ancient wisdom that transforms modern living, and let us know in the comments which of these 7 practices resonates most strongly with your current challenges. Your journey toward complete emotional freedom begins with your very next choice. Choose wisely, and let the strength of the ancient Stoics guide you toward the inner peace you deserve.